Morning came softly to the land, the way it always did out here, without asking permission. The sky over the high desert shifted from ash to pale gold, as if someone had brushed color onto an old canvas that had seen too many seasons. Wind moved through the grass in long, careful strokes. Nothing hurried. Nothing needed to at the edge of that quiet stood a ranch, not large, not proud, just standing, holding its ground the way tired men sometimes do. She walked near it with slow, measured steps. The Apache girl was young, barely into her 20s, but pain had aged her in ways years never could. Her back remained straight out of habit, though every movement sent a dull ache through her side, deep and unrelenting. It was the kind of pain that did not scream. It stayed. It settled in. It reminded her with every breath that her body was no longer a place of comfort. Her hair was braided neatly, dark against her shoulders, not for beauty, but for order. Order helped when the world inside felt unsteady. Her hands were capable, scarred lightly from work and travel, yet they trembled sometimes when the ache grew sharp. When that happened, she paused, never complained, never asked. She had learned long ago that pain spoken aloud often returned heavier. The ranch had not been meant for her. She knew that. She existed there the way shadows exist at dawn, not fully welcomed, not chased away either. Some days she helped with small tasks. Other days she simply sat beneath the overhang, watching dust drift like slow snow. It was better than where she had been. Before this place, there had been another man. The memory of him did not arrive loudly. It never needed to doubt. He had noticed her strength first, not her suffering. He admired what she could do when she pushed herself beyond reason. And when the pain finally forced her to stop, when her breath shortened and her knees gave way, his patience thinned like old rope. "You are young," he had said once. "You should endure more." She had tried. She always tried. But illness does not listen to pride, and the hurt inside her did not bend to his expectations. When she could no longer hide it, when her weakness became visible, his care faded. Not cruelly. Worse than that. Indifferently. That was the day she learned that being strong was only admired when it cost others nothing. Here, at this ranch, no one demanded explanations. An old cook with weathered hands sometimes left warm broth near her resting place. He never stayed to watch her drink it. A woman passing through once wrapped a shawl around her shoulders without a word, then walked on as if it were the most natural thing in the world. These small kindnesses did not heal her body, but they softened the edges of the days. And then there was the rancher. He had arrived one evening leading a tired horse, dust clinging to his coat and boots like the land itself had claimed him. He was not young, not old, somewhere in between, with a face shaped by sun and quiet thought. His eyes did not roam the way most men's did. They rested, observed, considered. When he first saw her, he did not stare. That mattered. He noticed the way she favored one side, the carefulness of her movements, the way her jaw tightened when pain surged and she refused to let it show. He saw these things the way a man sees weather forming on the horizon, without judgment, without alarm. Their first exchange was brief. Practical. Water was offered. She accepted. No questions followed. No sympathy lingered in his gaze. That night, she slept closer to the barn than the house, listening to the soft sounds of animals settling, the steady rhythm of life continuing without urgency. Pain woke her before dawn. It always did. She pressed her hand against her side and waited for the worst of it to pass. It did not. Her breath caught, sharp and shallow. The world narrowed to the ache, to the effort of staying upright. She lowered herself to the ground, knees folded beneath her, forehead touching the cool earth. "It hurts so much." The words slipped out before she could stop them. "I can't bear it." She had not meant for anyone to hear, but the rancher was awake. He stood a short distance away, still as the fence post beside him. He did not rush forward. He did not speak. He simply stayed where he was, letting her know she was not unseen. That, too, mattered. When the pain eased enough for her to lift her head, she found him still there. His presence was quiet, steady, like something that would not disappear the moment it became difficult. He said nothing. She said nothing more. The sun crept higher. Light touched the land. Another day began, carrying with it the same ache, the same uncertainty. But somewhere in that silence, something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, Her pain had been witnessed without being measured, without being judged. And though it still hurt just as deeply, though it still lingered in her bones and breath, it felt slightly less lonely than it had the day before. The land breathed, the ranch stood, and the story, slow and careful, had begun. Days did not change all at once. They rarely do. Out here, time moved the way water does in dry country. Slowly, patiently, finding its path without force. Morning followed morning, each one painted with the same pale sky and the same long shadows stretching across the land. She stayed at a tea first. She expected to be asked when she would leave. Expected the unspoken impatience that always arrived once weakness settled in for too long. It never came. The ranch did not push her away, and the man who owned it did not hurry her footsteps. She worked when her body allowed it. Light tasks, sorting grain, mending cloth, sitting more often than standing. When pain overtook her, she stopped without apology. No one scolded her for resting. That was new. The rancher passed her often, boots quiet against the ground, movements economical, as if he wasted nothing. Not words, not energy, not attention. Sometimes he nodded. Sometimes he simply set something within reach and continued on. Water, bread, a folded blanket when the nights grew cold. Kindness without ceremony unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. She watched him from a distance, the way wounded creatures do. Learned his patterns, his silences. He rose before dawn and returned late, carrying the smell of dust and animals and sun. When he spoke, it was usually to the land, to the horses, to the work that needed doing to her. He spoke only when necessary. And yet, she felt seen in ways that did not wound. The pain remained her constant companion. Some days it pressed so deeply into her side that breathing felt like walking uphill against wind. On those days, she sat beneath the shade and closed her eyes, letting the world soften around her. She did not hide her suffering here. She no longer felt the need. Once, a young ranch hand noticed her resting and frowned. "Work still needs doing," he muttered, not unkindly, but without understanding. The rancher did not raise his voice. He did not explain. He only said, "She works enough." The conversation ended there. A tea night, memories returned. Not as nightmares, but as quiet recollections that settled beside her like old ghosts. She remembered the first man's impatience, the way his eyes hardened when her body failed to keep pace with his expectations, how his care had thinned until it disappeared altogether. She wondered when that moment would come here. It did not point one evening. As the sun bled red across the horizon, she found herself speaking more than she intended. Not about pain, not about fear, about the land she came from, the sound of river water moving over stones. The way her people believed silence could be a form of respect. The rancher listened. He always listened. He did not interrupt with stories of his own. He did not offer comparisons. He let her words fall where they would, like seeds. That was when she realized something quietly important. She felt safe. Not because she was protected, but because she was not being tested. The side characters drifted in and out like passing weather. The old cook hummed while he worked, glancing at her with a knowing softness. A neighboring rancher warned the man once, quietly, that caring too much had consequences. The rancher only nodded. Pain does not announce itself when it returns. It arrives like a tide, steady and unrelenting. One afternoon, it struck her harder than before. The ground tilted, her legs failed her without warning, and she crumpled near the barn, breath trapped in her chest. She did not cry out. She never did. The rancher was there in moments. He lifted her carefully, as if her body were something precious and breakable, not something in the way. She expected him to tense, to rush, to demand answers. He did none of that. He carried her to the shade, set her down gently, and waited with her until the pain loosened its grip. His hand hovered near her shoulder, never touching unless she leaned closer on her own. That was the moment something inside her shifted. Staying, she realized, was not just about finding a place where she could rest her body. It was about finding a place where she did not have to brace herself against rejection. As the sun lowered and the day softened into evening, she breathed more easily. The ache remained, but fear had loosened its hold. She looked at the rancher then, really looked at him, and saw not a savior, not a rescuer, but a man who understood something essential. Some wounds do not need fixing, they need room. And in that understanding, she began to believe that staying might not be a mistake after all. The land had learned their rhythm by then: morning footsteps, evening stillness, the quiet agreement between work and rest. Even the wind seemed to slow when it passed through the ranch, as if it too had decided not to hurry them. Pain, however, did not learn new habits. Dai returned one night with a depth that stole her breath and bent her forward, hands pressed hard against her side, as though she could hold herself together by force alone. The moon was high, pale and distant, offering light without warmth. She did not call out. She had grown used to enduring in silence. But endurance has limits. When the pain finally broke through her composure, she found herself speaking without meaning to. Words slipped free, uneven and raw, as though they had been waiting for permission. She told him she had been hurting for longer than she could remember, that the pain had begun small, a quiet wrongness she thought would pass if she ignored it. It never did. It grew slowly, patient as the land, until it shaped the way she walked, breathed, lived. She spoke of fear, not of dying, but of being unwanted, of being looked at as something damaged, of knowing the moment when care would turn into inconvenience. She did not look at him while she spoke. When the words ended, silence filled the space between them. Not empty silence, the kind that listens back. The rancher sat close enough that she could feel his presence without being crowded. When he spoke, his voice carried no urgency, no need to fix what could not be fixed. He said he understood loss. Not her pain, not her body, but the quiet aftermath of watching something break and knowing it would never return to what it was. He spoke of choosing solitude because it required nothing from him, of how silence had once been a shelter. Then he said something that surprised them both. Staying, he said, was not an act of bravery for him. It was a choice, one he was finally ready to make. She felt the weight of that settle into her chest, warm and unfamiliar. Days later, word reached the ranch that there might be help elsewhere. A distant town, a doctor rumored to treat what others could not. The journey would be long, uncertain, painful in its own way. Hope arrived carefully, like something that might break if held too tightly. The first man returned with the news. Time had not softened him. His voice still carried the confidence of someone who believed strength meant control. He spoke of arrangements, of expectations, of help that came with conditions. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she declined, not harshly, not angrily. Simply, for the first time, she understood that choosing for herself did not require permission. That night, she sat with the rancher beneath a sky thick with stars. She told him she was afraid, not of the journey, but of believing in something gentle enough to stay. He did not promise her healing. He did not promise forever. He told her he would walk with her as far as she chose to go. That was enough. The decision was made quietly. No declarations, no urgency. They prepared together, hands working in shared silence. The cook packed food. The ranch hand offered a horse without comment. The land watched them leave, patient as ever. The road was hard. Pain flared and receded like a stubborn tide. There were nights she could not sleep, mornings she doubted her strength. Through it all, he remained, not hovering, not retreating, simply there. One night, when the pain crested high and the world narrowed again, she reached for his hand without thinking. He held it without surprise, without tightening his grip as if afraid to lose it. In that moment, she realized something quietly extraordinary. Love did not arrive as fire or force. It arrived as steadiness. It be why the time they reached the town, her fear had softened. Whatever awaited her there, she was no longer walking alone. The ache in her body remained, but something else had taken root beside it, a trust slow grown and resilient. And in that shared understanding, her heart, long guarded, finally found the courage to speak. The town did not greet them kindly. Most places do not. Dust lay thick in the streets, trampled by hurried lives that did not pause long enough to notice two travelers moving at a gentler pace. The doctor they sought lived at the edge of it, a small building with windows clouded by years of sun and wind. Inside, the air smelled of herbs and old wood and patience. The examination took time. Careful hands, quiet questions, no promises spoken aloud. When it ended, the truth arrived softly. The pain would not vanish entirely. Some damage could not be undone. There would be relief, though, space to breathe, nights that did not steal her strength so completely. She accepted this without breaking. That night, the pain returned harder than before, as if angered by the intrusion. Her body shook with it, breath tearing in shallow pulls. She curled inward, fighting the instinct to disappear into herself. The rancher stayed close. He did not speak words meant to soothe. He did not ask her to be strong. He placed his hand where she could find it and held steady while the storm passed, in the darkest hour. When exhaustion threatened to swallow her whole, she whispered again the words that had begun this journey that it hurts. This time, she did not add that she could not bear it. Morning came, pale and tentative. She woke to a quiet she had not known before. The pain lingered, familiar and stubborn, but it no longer ruled her breath. Relief had arrived not as a cure, but as mercy. They stayed in town only as long as necessary. The road back felt different, lighter, not because her body had changed completely, but because her heart had. When the ranch came into view, standing patient against the horizon, something inside her settled. The cook greeted them with a nod that carried relief. The ranch hand looked at her differently now, not with pity, with respect. Life resumed its slow rhythm. She moved carefully still, resting when needed, working when she could. Pain remained a quiet companion, but it no longer defined her worth. The rancher did not hover. He trusted her strength as much as he honored her limits. One evening, as the sky deepened into indigo, she stood beside him and watched the land breathe. She felt the ache rise, familiar as an old scar, and spoke without fear that it hurts. Then, after a pause filled with wind and understanding, she continued, "But I can bear it." He did not respond with words. He did not need to. His presence answered her in ways language never could. What endures, she learned, is not the absence of pain. It is the quiet decision to stay when leaving would be easier. It is kindness given without conditions. It is being seen not as broken, but as brave. Some hearts do not need mending. They need witness. And perhaps, she thought, so do our own. If this story found a place within you, if it reminded you of a wound you learned to carry with grace, take a moment now. Let your presence be known. Like the story, share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more tales that move softly through time. And tell us, gently, from where in the world are you watching tonight, as these old Wild West memories continue to travel farther than any road ever could.